fact that this will very likely be the final century of human civilization if the policies that they laud persist. One might even take a speech of President Obama's 2 years ago to be an eloquent death knell for the species. I'll quote it. He proclaimed with pride, to ample applause, that now under my administration, America is producing more oil today than at any time in the last 8 years. That's important to know. Over the last 3 years, I've directed my administration to open up millions of acres for gas and oil exploration across 23 different states. We are opening up more than 75% of our potential oil resources offshore. We've quadrupled the number of operating rigs to a record high. We've added enough oil and gas pipeline to encircle the earth and then some. The applause tells us something important about our social and moral malaise. The president was speaking in Cushing, Oklahoma. That's an oil town, as he announced in greeting his appreciative audience. In fact, it is the oil town. It's described as the most significant trading hub for crude oil in North America. And industry profits are to be secured as, quote, the president, producing more oil and gas here at home will continue to be a critical part of energy strategy, as the president promised. Well, that tells us something. It tells us that in the moral calculus of currently existing state capitalism, profits and bonuses in the next quarter greatly outweigh concern for the welfare of one's grandchildren. And since these are institutional maladies, they're not going to be easy to overcome. Well, there are ways to mitigate the crisis, maybe to overcome the threat of disaster. Perhaps the most successful of today's industrial societies is Germany, which is on a course towards sustainable energy. But that's likely to be reversed. The business pages in the United States are by now exulting in the fact that we can undercut European manufacturing by our lower energy prices, thanks to our commitment to exploit fossil fuels more efficiently and extensively. Accordingly, Europe is being forced to back away from its moves towards sustainable energy and will be compelled to join us in marching towards the cliff. That's a triumph of our remarkable socioeconomic arrangements, of which we can be greatly proud. Actually, Berger's prison is, however, a different one. He's speaking primarily about the expansion of financial capital in the past generation and its extraterritoriality, which he sees as caging almost all of us in a global prison as the market overwhelms national governments. He's certainly identifying significant elements of the modern world. Nevertheless, I see these developments again from a somewhat different perspective. The dramatic growth of financial capital in the past generation is certainly real, and it's coupled with something he doesn't discuss, the export of production. These processes are taking place within a global system that is very scrupulously and carefully designed to privilege investor rights and to lower wages and undermine working conditions by setting working people in competition with one another worldwide, while investor rights are greatly enhanced. And the term designed is crucial. It's highly misleading to describe these developments as a triumph of the market. They're anything but. The general framework is what are called free trade agreements. NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, is a prototypical example. If you take a look at NAFTA, the only accurate words in the title, North American Free Trade Agreement, the only accurate words in the title are North American. It's very far from free trade. It's highly protectionist to benefit exorbitant profits of pharmaceutical corporations and others. And in large measure, it's not concerned with trade at all. It is furthermore an agreement only if people are not part of their societies. It was opposed by large parts of the population, majorities in fact, in all three of the participating countries. Well, for such reasons, the NAFTA was designed in secret and implemented essentially without debate. There are good reasons why today's economic treaties, huge economic treaties, the Trans-Pacific and transatlantic partnerships, why they too are being negotiated in secret, though not completely in secret. They are not secret to the hundreds of corporate lawyers and lobbyists who are writing the detailed rules with consequences that one can readily imagine. Serious questions can also be raised about the alleged extraterritoriality of the financial institutions. There's a recent study of the International Monetary Fund that bears directly on this. The IMF researchers found that virtually the entire profit of the big banks in the United States can be traced to the government insurance policy. Informally, that's the policy called too big to fail. And that reaches far beyond the publicized bailouts, includes also access to cheap credit, inflated credit ratings, much else. The business press estimates the cost to taxpayers at over $80 billion a year. When the huge insurance company, AIG or Goldman Sachs or others like them, when they get into trouble because of the collapse of risky transactions, which in fact threaten to bring down the whole global financial system, they can run cap in hand to the nanny state that they nurture, demanding that it rescue them, and furthermore that it ensure that they emerge even richer than before the financial collapse, for which they were largely responsible, as in fact we have just witnessed once again. Nothing here about markets or extraterritoriality. And these are not small factors in the current socioeconomic regime. It is true, as John Berger pointed out, that a goal of government policy, government corporate policy, they're tightly interlinked, is to render the population isolated, frightened, atomized, and fearing a precarious existence. And in fact, that's often quite overt. Let's go back to the days when he was still considered St. Allen, one of the greatest economists of all time, before the collapse of the economy for which he shared responsibility thanks to his religious market fundamentalism. I'm referring to Alan Greenspan. Back then, as St. Allen, he testified before Congress explaining the success of the economy that he was administering. This was in the Clinton years. He explained proudly that a large part of his success could be attributed to what he called growing worker insecurity. And as economists can explain, worker insecurity is healthy for the economy. It means that workers will not seek decent wages and working conditions, and profits will accrue to those who call themselves the makers, meaning the makers of profits, thanks to the largesse of the public, as indeed the IMF study dramatically demonstrated, only one case. Well, the desired result of these government corporate policy-making efforts would be a global society of the kind envisioned by an investor's brochure, which was produced a few years ago by Citigroup, a huge banking conglomerate, which historically has been one of the leading beneficiaries of taxpayer largesse. The brochure advised investors to focus on what they called the plutonomy. That's the small sector of the global population, concentrated in the United States but worldwide, which is gaining extreme wealth in the pathological economy of today's world. The brochure points out that that's where the action is. That's where profits are to be made. What about the rest of society? They will become what is sometimes called a precariat, people living a precarious existence, surviving from paycheck to paycheck, if they are lucky enough to have one. So a small plutonomy, a general precariat. There's nothing inevitable about these processes. They are not the result of some mythical, invisible hand of the market. They're not the result of non-existent economic laws. They're a result of quite specific choices and decisions. All of this is by design. And these choices and decisions can be reversed by the means that have often been successful in the past. Organized mass popular movements dedicating to creating a better world, which certainly is possible, just as is proclaimed at the meetings of the World Social Forum. What's lacking is not opportunity, but will. There is no reason why they, that is, we, cannot tear down John Berger's prison walls. Thank you.